began with the scent of rain upon dust. The Kalam Desert, endless and devouring, had no memory of mercy. Its dunes shifted like titans in slow battle, swallowing ruins, rivers, and kingdoms alike. Caravans moved like ants across the Golden Sea, hoping only to outrun thirst, bandits, and the wrath of forgotten gods. Yet somewhere beyond the maps and the fear, there was a place whispered of in sand-struck taverns, a hidden oasis where the sun burned softer, the palms grew tall as towers, and trade flowed like lifeblood between ancient stones. It was said that the place was protected, not by blade or spell, but by questions, and by a dragon who never slept. The story spoke of Calatharian, the brass regent, the breath of the shifting sun, the guardian without chains, not a tyrant, not a conqueror, but a monarch of thought. He built no walls, raised no armies. His court was a ring of rugs beneath starlight, his throne a hollowed stone older than empires. To enter his domain was not to fight, but to speak, to persuade, to matter. But few found the oasis. Fewer still were invited to stay, and fewer still left unchanged. They came as the winds shifted, a caravan, not of merchants, but of need, adventurers hardened by other deserts, those of war, sorrow, and ambition. Sira, a paladin of the Morning Lord, bearing twin scars across her throat where falsehood once silenced her. Cassia, a wizard of the spinning keep of Siriwagen, whose scrolls numbered more than his days, and whose mind thirsted for truths deeper than spells. Nahla, a bard of wandering blood, daughter of lost courts, her voice as sharp as her silver-stringed oud. Tarek, a monk from the friary of Saint Amal, silent as broken idols, moving with the patience of dunes swallowing towers. The desert tested them first, with thirst, mirages, and the slow, grinding terror of endlessness. Yet, the monk heard a whisper through the night winds. The bard followed songs only memory remembered. The wizard read patterns in the shifting sands. And the paladin prayed, not for salvation, but for direction. And so, they found it. A ring of ancient palms cradled a lake as smooth as polished brass, its waters untouched by beast or bird. Around it sprawled a city not of conquest, but of memory. Sandstone spires bent by centuries into elegant bows, terraces of carved mosaics. The oasis city sprawled across an ancient crater, its rim crowned with petrified trees and crumbling towers. Golden pools reflected skies so deep they seemed to touch other worlds. Sculptures of brass and sandstone depicted scholars in eternal debate, merchants bartering not goods, but philosophies. The air was perfumed with myrrh and salt. Archways whispered riddles when the wind passed through them. Rugs of woven silk lay beneath a massive petrified fig tree, its roots entwined with shards of broken thrones. Hookahs smouldered with dream smoke. Jars of molten honey and salted dates awaited untouched, and reclining upon a dais carved from fused desert glass, shimmering like a second sunrise, was Calatharian. He was beauty made gravity. Long and lean, his body curled in repose like a question mark left unanswered. His scales shimmered not with solid brass, but shifting hues, morning bronze, twilight copper, the blinding gold of a noon sky. His wings were folded like silken tents, and his eyes gleamed with infinite welcome and infinite examination. He did not roar, he smiled. "You have come far," he said, his voice a vibration through sand and bone. But distance alone is no currency here. He lifted a single claw, languid and patient, and drew a perfect circle in the dust. "Answer me this. If wisdom and mercy could not coexist, which would you abandon?" The party were in equilibrium, 2 for, 2 against. Not such an easy decision, for what is one without the other? The court of Calatharian had begun, and with a claw as thin as a whisper, he drew a circle in the dust. I offer 3 riddles, 3 reflections. Answer, not for my amusement, but for your own. He spoke, and the desert seemed to hush. A well runs dry, a river swells to drown. A man may sip or starve. Which is the truer gift, scarcity or abundance? Sirah answered swiftly, speaking of balance, of discipline, of mercy and limitation. But Calatharian laughed softly, as water might in a stone basin. You speak as a lawgiver, he mused, but not as a wanderer. A mirror shows the face you wish to see. A pool shows the face that is. Which would you dive into, knowing you cannot surface again? Cassia pondered, spoke of knowledge, the pain of truth, the illusion of self. Calatharian's tail flicked through the sand, tracing a spiral. You speak as a scholar, he said, but not yet as a soul. 2 caravans pass in the night. One carries spices, the other silence, which enriches the desert more. Nala laughed, her eyes bright as distant cities, and sang of the silence between songs, the rhythm behind speech. Calatharian's head dipped in approval. You are closer, bard, he said. But beware, a tongue swift in jest is slow to listen. He turned last to Tarek, who had spoken not a word. The dragon's eyes gleamed like molten topaz. And you, stone-born silent one, what say you? Tarek knelt and pressed his hand to the sand, and said nothing, only listened. For the desert, the dragon, and the silence itself all sang. And in that stillness, Calatharian smiled, not as judge, but as kin. You, he said softly, have understood. But thought without action is a drought, and my people suffer. For weeks, the oasis had been beset by a hidden blight. Caravans vanished before reaching its gates. Traders whispered of raiders riding upon storms. Worse still, strange curses leached into the wells, salt turning sweet, sweet turning dry, maps bleeding false roads. It was no mortal threat. The oasis had been beset, not by raiders alone, but by an ancient Efreeti's subtle vengeance. A pact older than cities had been broken, and now the flames beneath the dunes sought to reclaim what once knelt to fire. Wells soured, paths twisted, dreams betrayed. Calatharian, bound by the law of invitation, could not strike preemptively. But you, he said, have been asked. He spread his wings, not to rise, but to send. The wind of his breath carried them outward, each bearing a piece of the debate they had forged. And so their trials in word became trials in deed. Their journey carried them across fractured dunes, where the sand whispered false names. They battled summoned elementals that sang promises of wealth and vengeance. They unmasked raider lords as mortal pawns of fiery masters, bound by enchanted brands. At the silent wells, where the waters of life ran black and poisoned, they met the enemy at dusk, when the desert sky bruised purple and the sands hissed secrets. The Efreeti's minions, sand-cloaked and rune-branded, struck first, sowing illusions across the dunes, splitting sight from mind. The oasis defenders, merchants and freed slaves, faltered beneath the sorcery, but the 4 pilgrims, armed not just with steel, but with truth, answered. Sira, whose lesson was of scarcity and abundance, shielded the last spring with her very body. Her blades sang of sacrifice, each strike a prayer that water might flow for the many, not the few. Cassia, who had chosen the painful face of reality, wove spells that unmasked the raider's enchantments. Where illusions of glory stood, he revealed only desperation and broken men. Nala, whose voice knew the silence between songs, unstrung the magic woven into the air. her song unmaking the Afriti's commands, freeing raiders from slavery of the mind. Tarek, the silent, moved unseen, severing the last chain, breaking the lead raider's staff of command with a blow that echoed across the sands, like the drumbeat of forgotten gods. Together, they turned the tide, until the desert itself rose against them. The Afriti, wounded but unbroken, called forth a final fury, a sandstorm like a living nightmare, red and gold and black, screaming with winds that flayed flesh from bone. The defenders stumbled, wells were swallowed, hope cracked like a dry riverbed. The adventurers gathered atop a rocky rise, backs pressed together, teeth bared against a doom they could neither slay nor escape. The storm loomed, a living god of destruction, swirling closer, closer, and just as despair eclipsed the last star, the sky cracked, not with lightning, but with light. A spiral of molten gold and white flame tore through the heart of the storm, and from it descended Calatharian, wings unfurled wide, each membrane a cathedral of molten brass, catching the furious wind and forcing it back, scales blazing like hammered sunlight, his body a living sculpture of might and mercy, head bowed, gaze unwavering, his eyes twin suns reflected in the swirling storm, claws dug into stone, anchoring the crumbling earth itself, tail coiled around the adventurers, sheltering them like seeds in a sacred grove. The storm slammed against him and broke. With a single breath, a low hum of dream wind spun with desert heat. Calatharian shattered the curse driving the storm, the Afriti sorcery torn apart like old parchment. The remaining Afriti screamed, a sound swallowed instantly by the howling void, and vanished, banished by forces far beyond mortal reckoning. And then, just as suddenly, the brass regent gathered his wings. He turned a single gleaming eye toward the battered pilgrims, his voice threading through their minds like silk on stone. Thought born into action becomes eternity, and with a breath scented of myrrh and memory, he vanished, back to his oasis, back to his court of questions, leaving behind only the rippling sands, the taste of rain in the air, and the knowledge that something ancient and kind had intervened, not to rule, not to conquer, but to remember. Before the dunes swallowed cities and the winds erased names, there was Io, the prime worm, the progenitor of dragonkind. From his sundered spirit were born both cruelty and compassion, ruin and revelation. Among the elder brood sprung forth from the golden veins of creation were the brass dragons, beings shaped not for conquest or dominion, but for discourse. Legends whisper that the first brass dragon was born at the cusp of dawn, where the sun first kissed the dreaming sands. Some claim they were once spirits of wind and word, given flesh by the words of Bahamut himself to safeguard the world's forgotten stories. Others believe they are the remnants of a civilization older than empires, beings who once spoke the language primeval and wove creation with speech. Regardless of origin, brass dragons are sovereigns not of land, but of thought. Where other dragons carve kingdoms from stone and blood, they weave dominions from questions and answers. Theirs is not a tyranny of talons, but a reign of riddles. Of all true dragons, none embody the warmth of conversation and the silence of desert dawns, quite like the brass dragon. Their form is a testament to radiant impermanence. Long and lithe, their bodies seem less constructed than poured, as though molten sunlight had been coaxed into the shape of a dragon and left to cool mid-motion. A massive, fluted plate sweeps back from their broad heads, a single, seamless shield of gleaming brass, dished like a plowshare. When these dragons burrow, as they so often do, it is with a grace that turns their very skull into a blade, slicing through the sands with effortless might. Framing their expressive faces are twin sets of sweeping horns, curved backward like the banners of desert kings. Beneath their keen, amber-lit eyes, supple lips, and a long forked tongue grant them a startling range of expression. Each smile, each flick of the tongue, a language as rich as any spoken word. Bladed chin horns, sharp as scimitars, grow longer and deadlier with age, visible even when viewed from below. Their wings stretch wide, ray-like and elegant, their membranes running from shoulder to tail tip, supported by long spines perpendicular to the backbone. When they unfurl, they capture the desert winds, like the woven sails of nomad ships, casting vast rippling shadows across the dunes. Their tails, ending in wicked curved blades, are instruments of precision, tools of war rarely drawn, save for the most desperate moments. A wormling's scales are muted, a dull, mottled brown, humble as desert stone, but with time and wisdom, the desert's kiss transforms them. The dullness burns away into a burnished, golden luster. Their hides shimmer with hues of morning bronze, desert copper, and the molten gold of an evening sun. Their wings and frills darken at the joints into mottled greens and reddish fire, deepening as centuries pass. Their eyes, too, shift, becoming molten pools of liquid amber, mirrors to the timeless patience of the sands. Even their scent speaks of their dominion, a tang of hot metal and sun-baked stone. Yet it is not their beauty alone that defines them. Brass dragons are the most gregarious of all dragonkind, drawn to conversation with a thirst rivaled only by their love for sunlight. Throughout their long lives, they engage in thousands of dialogues with creatures of every ilk, sages, soldiers, wanderers, and fools alike, weaving a tapestry of knowledge that they guard and share with equal fervor. For the price of a story or a small treasure, a brass dragon will barter wisdom beyond mortal reckoning. But woe to those who flee without speaking. Should a visitor attempt to escape a brass dragon's presence without indulging its appetite for dialogue, the dragon may respond with mischievous pique. A breath of soporific mist, sleep gas, will send the hapless soul tumbling into unconsciousness. They may awaken pinned gently beneath vast claws, or worse, find themselves buried to the neck in golden sands, the dragon's questions washing over them like the tide. Trusting by nature, brass dragons cherish those who share their passion for speech. Yet they are no fools. They recognize deceit as a fellow game and often respond in kind, turning mutual trickery into a contest of wit rather than a cause for true enmity. Unlike many of their kin, brass dragons tread lightly upon the world. They consume little, understanding the desert's fragile heartbeat. At dawn, they harvest nourishment from the scarce morning dew, lifting each tiny bead from plants with deft flicks of their long tongues. A reverence for life few would expect of a creature so mighty. Yet for all their sociability, brass dragons are strangely solitary among their own kind. They remain in loose contact with distant kin, banding together only when true threat demands. Their wormlings are nurtured carefully, then sent upon pilgrimages of knowledge, sacred quests across the world's breadth, to gather experience and wisdom as vital as breath itself. Over the centuries, many forge vast networks of informants. Jinn, Jan, sphinxes, wandering philosophers, and learned mortals. Through these bonds, they keep their talons lightly pressed upon the pulse of the world, weaving an unseen web of stories, secrets, and subtle influence. Yet when words fail, when diplomacy shatters and war is forced upon them, the desert itself rises to answer their call. Their first breath is of fireless fury, a scouring blast of superheated air that strips flesh from bone, that scours the oases into fields of glass. For enemies they deem worthy of mercy, a second breath is drawn, a cloud of slumbering mist that stills the battlefield without bloodshed. As they age, the sands themselves become their allies. Illusions shimmer at their call. The winds bow to their whispers. The desert's fury dances at their talons. Weather bends, flames answer, and mirages bloom as living weapons. But even then, even at their most terrible, brass dragons do not revel in ruin. They fight, always, as they live, to teach, to protect, and above all, to converse with the world, for as long as the sun still kisses the dunes. The lairs of brass dragons are dreams of lost grandeur, hidden from mortal eyes and veiled by illusion, song, and the patient whispers of shifting sand. Drawn to sunlight and desiring the dry kiss of arid winds, brass dragons make their homes where the earth itself seems scorched into slumber. They favor the calderas of sunken oases, the crags of desert canyons, and the mesas where the winds howl like ancient choirs. Here, in these sacred places, they carve their sanctuaries into the bones of the world. Their lairs are most often found high upon rocky cliff faces, the mouths of the caves turned eastward to drink the first light of dawn. For the brass dragon, sunrise is not merely spectacle, it is nourishment. Many also claim bolt holes at the bases of cliffs, where the desert winds have piled up centuries of sand. From these hidden entrances, the dragons burrow winding tunnels parallel to the cliff face, vanishing into labyrinthine networks that grant them swift passage between subterranean halls and distant exits. Dungeon-dwelling brass dragons, who dwell nearer to mortal cities, are no less strategic. They craft lairs near heavily traveled routes, where pilgrims, merchants, and scholars wander, all potential conversational partners to sate their endless curiosity. The entrance to a brass dragon's true sanctum is rarely defended by claw or trap. Instead, it is obscured by riddles spun into the very land. Shimmering mirages and false trails dance in the heat, while whispered warnings drift upon the wind. Only the patient, the wise, or the desperately lucky find their way to the truth. Within, the lair unfolds like a cathedral of memory. Walls of fused desert glass catch the sun's fury and fracture it into kaleidoscopic rainbows across the sands. Towers of stone, sculpted by wind and eons, stand frozen in poses of eternal music. Vast halls echo with the preserved whispers of lost cultures, scrolls, statues, musical instruments, and the sacred relics of civilizations long vanished. Each chamber is crafted not for war, but for dialogue. Alcoves designed for conversation. Pools of starlit water perfect for reflection. Gardens of scentless blossoms that bloom only under moonlight, perfuming the air with silent memory. To dwell in a brass dragon's home is to be in constant conversation with the dragon, with history, and with the desert itself. Brass dragons covet not merely gold or jewels, but treasures of speech, magic items that can converse, intelligent telepathic weapons, enchanted lamps with jinni bound within, are prized above all others. To a brass dragon, a voice locked within a relic is a friend waiting to be awakened. Yet they are cautious with their hoards. Great caches of wealth are buried beneath dunes or hidden within forgotten ruins, secreted far from their visible lairs. No maps mark these troves, for the dragon's memories are as vast and flawless as the desert sky. A chest found in a lonely oasis, or an ancient coffer unearthed by a sandstorm, may well be a brass dragon's hidden treasure, and woe to the unwitting who disturb it. Their dominion over the desert extends beyond territory. The shifting sands and roaring winds heed their silent commands. They can disperse vapors and gases with but a thought, extinguish unprotected flames, and twist the landscape itself into a living guardian. In the presence of a legendary brass dragon, the very land becomes enchanted. Tracks appear miraculously in the sand within miles of their lair, leading travelers to safe shelters and hidden wells, steering them subtly away from places the dragon prefers undisturbed. Illusory beasts, lions, serpents, desert shades, wander the dunes within a few miles, appearing fierce and formidable, though they are but phantoms made of heat and memory. The dragon's awareness extends to every water source within its domain. Any creature capable of speech that approaches a spring, a pool, or a hidden cistern finds itself already known, already weighed in the dragon's mind. The water is supernaturally nourishing, binding soul and body once more to the weave and enhances health in a manner becoming of divine majesty. A brass dragon's lair is not a fortress. It is a dialogue with the world, a testament to endurance, memory, and the patient artistry of time. Brass dragons are not born in silence. They arrive chattering. From the moment their shells crack, wormlings emerge not with roars of domination, but with endless questions. To the wind, to the stars, to the bones of the desert they ask, what is light? What is hunger? What is I? Their voices are small but insistent, the voices of curiosity incarnate. These fledglings are as joyful in sun as in sand. Their young wings beat unsteadily but eagerly, while their claws test the dunes for burrowing with equal delight. They bask in the warmth of morning, bodies sprawled across sun-drenched slopes, their scales still dull and mottled like the bronze of forgotten bells. Their breath weapons, a trickle of fire, a puff of sleep, are used rarely, and only in moments of desperation. When danger comes, they would rather flee or speak than fight. But word travels fast through the deserts, and stories faster still. Wormlings who hear tales of glory often seek quests of their own. They wander the sands, curious and bold, drawn towards cities, ruins, and travelers who speak of far lands and forgotten truths. As they enter youth, brass dragons become tireless wanderers. They circle across continents, often leaving their lairs for years at a time to explore the edges of the known world. Many forge friendships with other metallic dragons and act as messengers between allied flights. Their skills in flight and burrowing refine, and they begin wielding their fire and sleep breath with growing precision. Yet, even in battle, they prefer dialogue, seeking compromise before carnage. In adulthood, they are no longer collectors of stories. They become their weavers. Now physically imposing and magically adept, adult brass dragons command mastery over elemental fire, illusion, and the very winds of the desert. Their breath can incinerate armies or lull them to slumber in moments. They shift forms with ease, walk unseen through crowds, or appear as sages beneath the stars. Yet even with such power, they remain among the most gregarious of their kind, treating deception, when needed, as a game, and violence only as a necessary last act. They begin to claim territories not as tyrants, but as curators. They establish sanctuaries, havens for scholars, philosophers, pilgrims, and wanderers. Within these domains, truth is traded for dialogue, and conversation becomes the coin of the realm. Their networks grow vast, webs of informants, allies, and voices that stretch across realms. Then, in the final stage of their existence, they become something more. They are myths given breath, oracles of the desert, whose riddles shape kings, and whose wisdom can divert wars. Their minds stretch across the world like shadowless sundials, measuring not time, but truth. These ancients command unmatched dominion over illusion, fire, and transformation. Their control over the weave itself seems effortless. Weather, sand, and story bend at their will. Some operate through elaborate webs of messengers, while others speak only when the sands shift in warning. Their breath weapons, now divine in potency, are reserved only for moments when every word has failed and every question has gone unanswered. They battle not only the forces of tyranny and deception, but also the entropy of ignorance itself. Across time, they become the great teachers of mortals and immortals alike, voices of the past warning the future. To a brass dragon, war is not waged with claw and flame, but with dialogue, patience, and the power of questions well posed. They are philosophers before predators, sages before warriors. Battle to them is never the first course. They would rather disarm with words than with wounds, and bind a foe in a riddle rather than in chains. Where others roar, a brass dragon debates. Where others strike, it speaks. But do not mistake this for frailty. Brass dragons are still dragons, proud, ancient, and terrifying when roused. Though many scholars call them the most humble of their kind, this humility is itself an echo of draconic arrogance. They do not demand reverence, for they assume it will be offered freely once their brilliance is heard. Their loquacity, unceasing and rich, is not a plea for company. It is a gift bestowed, and they will not see it refused. A brass dragon will go to great lengths to converse. Should a guest attempt to flee their presence without indulging in proper dialogue, the dragon may react with a charming peek, a spell of suggestion, or a cloud of soporific breath. Those who fall asleep in the dunes may awaken buried up to their necks in warm sand, blinking into the sun, as the dragon carries on, undeterred, with philosophical inquiry or light gossip. Despite this playful nature, brass dragons are quick to act when threatened. Their first instinct is always to end a conflict without blood, a well-placed cloud of sleep gas, a swift teleportation, or a change of form to escape notice. Younger dragons often avoid confrontation entirely, soaring out of reach or burrowing beneath the sands to hide. But age brings both confidence and power. Older brass dragons are less inclined to flee, but they still shun battle unless it serves a higher cause, the defense of knowledge, sanctuary, or innocent lives. When combat is inevitable, they prefer to fight with advantage, choosing terrain, timing, and tactics to end a fight swiftly and decisively. Their chosen home, the high desert cliffs and sunlit plateaus, often brings them into territorial friction with blue dragons, whose fury and ambition clash with the brass dragon's principles of dialogue and restraint. Though blues are stronger in raw aggression, the brass worm counters with foresight, relying on vast networks of informants, illusion, and speed. They often avert such conflicts before they ignite. Sometimes, they do so in person. More often, their messengers act as subtle winds that scatter storms before they form. Yet when all words fail and the sands demand blood, the brass dragon becomes a force of terrifying elegance. Their breath weapon is not a flame, but a furnace, a blast of superheated desert wind that scours flesh from bone, glacifies stone, and sunders armies in a heartbeat. Their claws fall not with fury, but with surgical precision. Each blow lands as if concluding an argument, not delivering a threat. In defense of their lairs, their people, and their truths, they become cataclysms, storms of brass and burning air wrapped in philosophy and purpose. Yet even in war, the brass dragon teaches. Every movement is a parable. Every roar, a sermon. Every wound inflicted carries the weight of a lesson. Think before you strike. Speak before you destroy. Understand before you condemn. They do not seek the defeat of armies. They seek the death of ignorance. The storm has passed. The sands have settled. The dunes, ever shifting, have buried the battle and smoothed the scars. The last star burns behind a curtain of gold and dust. But in the heart of the Kalim Desert, somewhere beyond the reach of maps and mercenaries, the oasis still sleeps beneath its ring of palms. The air still hums with riddles. The fig tree still drinks the silence of stars. And beneath it all, upon a throne carved from fused glass and memory, Larian reclines once more. He waits, not in slumber but in stillness, not as a tyrant, but as a teacher. His eyes half-lidded, watching the movements of sand and thought alike. The adventurers have gone, returned to roads where no oasis whispers guidance. But they carry the brass dragon's questions still, etched into the quiet places of the soul. Questions that bloom not in battle, but in reflection. Questions that change a life, not by command, but by invitation. And so the court remains, invisible to those who seek power, hidden from those who seek conquest. But for the weary, the wise and the willing, the court of Calatharian endures. A place where words weigh more than gold, where mercy outshines might, and where even silence is heard. And should you ever find yourself lost in the desert, your water low, your hope flickering like a mirage, listen. To the wind between the dunes, to the hush beneath the stars, to the voice that is not sound, but memory. He does not sleep. He listens,